Yo, today I wanted to talk a little bit about different repository setups, that being mainly monorepositories and multi-repositories, and then a little bit about the pros and cons for the different setups. Then finally I wanted to take a look at how we could get a monorepo up and running with internal packages and multiple applications that will then consume these packages to get a really nice developer working experience. So let's take a look at an example. When you create your first application, let's say you create an admin dashboard, your repository will probably look something like this. You will have some configurations files in the top. Then you will have like a source folder. This is where your source code for the application lives. If this is a admin dashboard, which is a front-end type of application, then you have some components with some UIs, and then you will also have some pages. Now, the problem is that what happens if you maybe want to make a landing page for your application? Well, what you can do is that you can take these repositories and you can create a new one called, for example, landing page, which will look something similar. You will probably have, this is also a front end, might be a little bit different because this maybe needs some more server-side rendering for better CEO, but there are some similarities with like maybe you want to have the same configuration, and also you probably want to use the same kind of UI components so that the apps feel similar, right? So there's nothing wrong with doing it this approach, having two separate repositories for this, but what you will end up doing is either you could copy the code from your admin dashboard, like your UI components, over to your landing page. Now this isn't really maintainable in the long run because every time you do changes to your UI components, you would have to copy them between the repositories. Now what you could do is that you could create a third repository called something like shared UI maybe, and in here you can remove all the unnecessary things that you don't need. You can move maybe the config files, and then you can move the pages, because obviously this is not going to be a application anymore, this is going to be a package. And then what you can do with this is then, if you're in a company, maybe you have like a internal package nexus, or if not, then you can always just host your package in npm. So let's say you do that for now. You have npm, and what you can then do is you can take the shared UI and you can publish them to your npm. That way the landing page and the admin dashboard could both use the same package from the npm. Now with this setup, every time you do changes to your shared UI, you will have to build your new package and publish it to npm. Now if you set up proper pipelines, this wouldn't be a big problem, because obviously then you can, whenever code is pushed to the main branch, you can have a pipeline automatically building it, automatically publishing a new version to your npm, and then you just have to update the version in your pages that use this application. So this is a perfectly valid way of setting it up. But you could also go in a different direction, and that is being mono repositories. So in a mono repositories, you will typically have something that could look something like I have in front of me here. You will have a folder for your apps, and in your apps you will have all the different apps, this being the admin dashboard from the previous example and the landing page. And these will have all the source codes for that application in them. Then you would also normally have a package folder. Inside here you can define all the different packages that you want to create for your project or your company or this whole system basically. And then inside here we have put the shared UI, which is going to define all the UI components. And then also I created the shared config, which has some config file that your application can import. Now this same goes that you don't have to create only one shared UI. You could also create shared config as like another repositories and have that connect to the npm registry. That is also totally fine. But in the mono repositories, you will have everything in one single repository. And as you're going to see when we try to implement this, the benefit of this is that you don't really have to publish any of your package to any registry. You can consume them in your application directly using some monorepository tooling. Now there are some drawbacks with monorepository as well. As your project grows and you get more and more apps, more and more packages, the repository is going to grow in size and it's going to take longer to, for example, clone down everything. If you use TypeScript, then the TypeScript language server might suffer a little bit in performance. One big concern that people have is that configuring your pipelines might be a little bit different in mono repositories, because you don't want to trigger pipeline and build everything whenever, for example, changes in the admin dashboard are pushed to the main branch. In that case, you only want to rebuild the admin dashboard page, so you need to set up your pipelines in a different way so that only the specific app that has the specific changes are actually redeployed to your environments. With that said, let's jump over to our editor and see how we could get a monorepository like this up and running. Okay, so here we are in a completely empty repository. I've just called mine tutorial and I have navigated into it in my terminal. We're going to be using PNPM workspaces to get this up and running in this tutorial. Now there are some other tooling that you might want to look into, for example TurboPack, but for this tutorial we're just going to keep it simple with using PNPM workspaces. So the first thing we're going to have to do is that we're going to have to initialize the workspace simply with typing in PNPM init. This is going to create a really basic package with some names, some versions and basic scripts. The next thing we want to do is, because this is going to be a Git project, we obviously want to have a Git ignore. I'm just going to keep this really basic for this tutorial. Feel free to add more in here as you go, depending on the different types of projects you have. We want to add different types of files and folders that you don't want to commit to your remote repository. The next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to create some folders. We're going to create a apps folder, and then we're also going to create a packages folder. Now, in the apps, this is where your apps will live, and in your packages, this is where your packages will live. The next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to create a workspace file. This is going to be called PNPM workspace, and it's going to be a YAML file. Inside here, we want to define our different packages. Now, it might be a little bit confusing that in this workspace file, both the apps folder and the packages folder are called like packages. So essentially what we're doing here is that we're telling PNPM workspaces that there are different applications living in these two folders. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to create our first application. And I'm just going to create a really basic TanStack start application. I'm going to use their template. The thing we want to do to create this is we're going to cd into our application folder, and then I'm going to run the command from the documentation to get the TanStack template, and then I'm just going to give it the name of landing page. Okay, so now the command is finished and the application has been added to my repositories. Now, in a mono repositories, you don't want to navigate back and forth. Like, we can always navigate into landing page and then run the typical PNPM dev to start our dev server. But you usually don't want to navigate into the specific application in the mono repository. You want to be able to do everything from the root of your project. To be able to run this application from the root, we're going to have to modify the package.json a little bit. This has the name that is just from the template that we used. We're going to have to remove this and then give it the name of the app that we want. So in my case, that's going to be landing page. Now we can go into a terminal. We can go all the way back to the root of the repositories, and we can run PNPM and then use this filter and then filter by the name of the application, and then we can call whatever command we want to run on this application. Of course, I haven't installed the dependencies. Now I can show you how we'll do that. Same command, PNPM install, and then we can use filter landing page to only install the dependencies for the landing page, or we can just simply do PNPM install and install all dependencies for all the projects in our mono repositories. Now, right now we only have one, which is the landing page, but this will still work just fine. So now that everything is installed, we can use the same filter command that I tried earlier to run the dev server. So now the dev server is up and running, and we can see that we have a basic TanStack application. Nothing fancy here, and so let's move to the next step. So the next step will be to build our first package. I'm going to create a UI package that our landing page can consume. So to do this, we want to navigate into our packages, and then we want to create our package. I'm going to create a React/Vite package for this. So I'm going to run the command PNPM create Vite at latest. Then let the command do its thing. I'm going to call this shared UI. It's going to be a React project. We're going to use TypeScript, and there we go. Now there are some additional things we're going to have to do to make this into a package and not a default React application. So I'm just going to do that quickly, and then I'll be back. Okay, so now I've set up the basic shared UI. This has some library configs. We have the source folder. This is you can run this application as a default React app. And the reason why I've set it up this way is so that you can create your components in this lib file. I've created a button component here, and then we can use them in the source in this app. And And then that way you can run filter share UI dev to run a dev server for this React app. We can open it up and then we can see our button right here. And this way we can go into our library button and then we can change whatever we want to do with it. For example, let's maybe make it red instead. And now it's red, and then we can test our button in here. Now what we want to do in order to be able to use this in our actual landing page and not just in our library itself is we want to build it. So we want to do pm filter share UI, and then we want to do build. And this is going to take everything from our library folder and it's going to create it in this dist folder right here. So now we have everything here, and now we can start using it in our landing page. To do this, we want to do pm add shared UI. So we want to add shared UI. Then we want to add a filter to landing page. This says that we want to add this shared UI library to our landing page. Then we also want to add -- workspace to signal that this shared UI is part of our workspace. Now when this is done, if we go into our package of our landing page, we can see in our dev dependencies we have now the shared UI, which has this workspace and then with a caret. Now we can go into our source, routes, and let's just find the page. And then if I go all the way up here, we should be able to import a button from shared UI. And then we can use it down here. And something like click me. And now if we run this application with filter landing page dev, we can open this up, and now we have our fancy button in our Tansta application as well. Now you might be asking, what if I now want to do some changes? Let's say maybe we want to change it back to having the blue color that we just did. If I do the changes and then I refresh our Tansta application, it's not gonna work. We have to do some additional steps. Let's just open a new terminal so we don't stop our Tansta application. To make these changes actually reflect in the consuming application, we have to rebuild the application because the Tansta application is reading the code from the dist, which is the build output. And when we do changes to the lib, we have to rebuild it so the Tansta can read the new changes. Now, you could just run the build command every time you do changes, but there is also something else you can do. You can do pm do the filter on the shared UI or whatever package you are working on. Let me just see if I can type. Then you can do the same build command. So this is the typical build command you would run when you just want to build a new version. But you can also add a flag called watch. And now this is gonna watch the build file. So whenever we make changes, if I change back to red, it's gonna see automatically start building. Then change it back to blue again, automatically rebuild. And now if I go to Tansta refresh, we can see that it is blue. Just to demonstrate it even further, if you now change it to green, save, now it's green in our Tansta. There are some hover effects still here, but it's green. And you can do this with every file. So the pro with this is that you still have to build your package every time you do changes to it, but you don't have to publish it to npm or to an internal nexus or anything like that. You can just consume it directly in this workspace. So that is how you can set up a really basic monorepositories. Of course, you can expand this, have multiple packages. Maybe you want to have a package for shared config, so you don't have to specify your Twitter config and all of that stuff every time you create an application. You can have multiple applications that can consume different types of packages, and then you can do basically whatever you want to extend this setup. So that's all I had for this video. If you have any feedback or you have any questions, please leave a comment below, and then I will see you all next one.